In a Suffolk churchyard in the year 1810, something odd happened. As reported in the September 1815 edition of the European magazine, the curious vault at Staunton, Suffolk. On opening it some years since, several leaden coffins with wooden cases that had been fixed on biers were found displaced, to the great astonishment of many of the inhabitants of the village. When, some time ago, another of the family dying, they were a second time found displaced. And 2 years after, they were not only found all off the biers, but one coffin, as heavy as to require 8 men to raise it, was found on the 4th step that leads into the vault. Staunton is almost certainly a misprint for Stanton, and Stanton is a village 9 miles northeast of Bury St Edmunds. This is not the only time coffins have apparently taken it upon themselves to move about, but perhaps the most famous report of dancing coffins originates not from the British Isles, but from the West Indies. The mystery of the Chase Vault is one of those macabre local stories that somehow reached worldwide attention, the sort of story that finds its way on to In Search Of and into books about ghosts and mysteries. Into the tale, some confusion with a similar tale from an island in the Baltic Sea has crept. Details concerning horses going wild and strange sounds coming from within the sealed vault. In this video, we will look at the mystery of the Chase Vault. We will not involve ourselves with poltergeists and curses, regardless of how much fun that might be, but with 3 practical solutions. And if you like this video, then why not press the like button, share it on social media, and subscribe to this channel. If you do not like this video, then press the dislike button, share it on social media, the video, not the dislike button, although you can give it a go if you really want to, and subscribe to the channel anyway. In the pre-Columbian era, the island now called Barbados was called Aishiru Gana Ayam. This may mean Redstone Island with teeth outside, or red land with white teeth. The island was once inhabited by the Agniri and then the Kalinago. The name Barbados comes from the Portuguese, who were the first Europeans to take note of the island. Barbados is some 21 miles north to south and 14 miles east to west. By the early 19th century, it was a British colony, the sort of place where prosperous middle-class people signalled their high Christian virtue by running sugar plantations worked by slaves. The parish church of Christchurch on the south coast still overlooks Austin's Bay. The first church itself was destroyed by a flood, the second by a hurricane in 1780, the third by a hurricane in 1831. The fourth church was destroyed by fire, and the current church is presumably the fifth. It was the rector of Christchurch, the Reverend Thomas H. Alderson, who seems to have been the original source of the Chase Vault story, which was then retold by Captain James Alexander in his book Transatlantic Sketches. Alderson was rector from 1812 to 1820 and apparently wrote 2 accounts. The first contemporary with the events reported, and the second a later account in pamphlet form, which differed slightly in a few details. And there was also a second eyewitness, the Honourable Nathan Lucas, a member of the Barbados Assembly who was present for the 1820 opening of the vault. To quote Nile Finneran and Christina Welsh, Thus, in a post-colonial Caribbean context, we find all the ingredients of a 19th century Northern European macabre Gothic horror story: the inversion of order, disturbance of the dead, and supernatural agency. It must be the case that the exterior of the vault was refurbished at some time between 1923 and today, for what we see now does not agree with an earlier 1923 photograph. Our photograph from the 1920s, which comes from Sir Algernon Aspinall's Pocket Guide to the West Indies, has the same roof, and the vault's situation today is similar to that seen in our photograph. But the vault in the photograph appears to be narrower. It also lacks the square apertures we see today, as well as the family crest above the doorway. Indeed, the doorway in the photograph is taller than that of today's vault. Furthermore, the vault today has a platform in front of it, surrounded by posts linked by a chain, whilst there is no sign of these in the older photograph. Admittedly, the vault is overgrown in the 1923 photograph, and the platform might be under the vegetation, but it is clear the posts and chain, at any rate, are more recent additions. The alternative is that the vault in the 1923 photograph, or the vault presented to us today, is the wrong vault. The vault is partly above ground and partly below. It is sunk deep into the ground and is excavated out of limestone rock. The upper part of the vault is reportedly solid masonry, large blocks of local coral cemented together. Inside, the walls and ceiling are of brick. The ceiling is arched, but when viewed from outside, it is flat. The interior floor space measures 12 feet by 6.5 feet. The back wall consists of two masonry walls, an inner wall and an outer wall. The entrance is a doorway which, according to Rupert Gould, was once closed by way of a slab of blue Devon marble. It required 6 or 7 men to move it, and it was cemented into place. These days, the vault has what appears to be an iron gate. From the doorway there are stone steps leading out of the vault. It is said there was an inscription, now lost, recording the construction of the vault by the widow of the Honourable James Elliot. Elliot died on the 14th of May 1724. However, there does not seem to be any sign James Elliot was ever interred inside the vault. The first recorded interment was Mrs. Thomasina Goddard, whose maiden name was Walrond. She was presumably related to the widow of James Elliot, Elizabeth, whose maiden name was also Walrond. The history of the Chase Vault starts around 1724. When it was built for the Honourable James Elliot, who had died that year. Apparently, though, he was not interned in the vault, but buried in the aisle of the parish church. The vault seems to have been empty and unused until the 31st of July 1807, when Mrs. Thomasina Goddard was deposited inside, supposedly inside a coffin of only wood. At some point between 1807 and 1808, the vault passed into the ownership of the Chase family, and on the 22nd of February, Miss Mary Ann Maria Chase, infant daughter of Colonel Thomas Chase, was interred. We might wonder where were members of the Chase family buried before the death of Mary Chase. Given how suddenly the vault passed into their hands, the Chase family either had a very sudden need for it, or they were related to Mrs. Goddard and inherited the vault. On the 6th of July 1812, Miss Dorcas Chase, another daughter of Thomas Chase, followed her sister into the vault. Note that at this time there was no displacement of coffins. However, about a month later, on the 9th of August, the vault had to be reopened for Thomas Chase himself, and the 3 coffins already inside were found in disarray. Mary Chase's coffin in particular had moved from the northeastern corner to the opposite corner and was found almost on end, head downwards. Once the coffins were tidied up, Thomas Chase's coffin was interred. It is said to have been heavy, requiring 8 men to lift it, and this in an already confined space with 3 other coffins. 4 years later, there was a violent slave uprising, and on the 25th of September, the Chase vault was opened for an 11-year-old infant called Samuel Brewster Ames. Once again, the coffins were found in disarray. 2 months went by, and then on the 17th of November, a militiaman, Mr. Samuel Brewster, was interred in the Chase vault. Yet again, the coffins were in disarray. On the 17th of July 1819, the Chase vault was again opened, this time for Mrs. Thomasina Clark. The coffins were, once more, in disarray. By this time, Mrs. Goddard's coffin, the oldest coffin, had decayed into pieces. These pieces were tied together in a bundle and left inside the vault, apparently stacked against a wall. There is no mention of the body. According to Alderson's account, at the time of this 1819 interment, Stapleton Cotton, Baron Combermere, was present, along with his aides and a considerable crowd. Lord Combermere, later a Viscount and a Field Marshal, was then a Lieutenant General and the Governor of Barbados. One of his aides, incidentally, was Sir Thomas Moody, whose son Richard would found British Columbia. The interior of the vault was examined, but no trace of a hidden entrance was found. Sand was spread on the floor to detect footprints, and the entrance was sealed with cement. Lord Combermere put his seal on the entrance, and some other witnesses added private marks of their own. About a year later, on the 18th of April 1820, the vault was opened in order to check the positions of the coffins. Lord Combermere was again present, and the witnesses included Nathan Lucas. The seals and private marks were still in place, and the door still cemented. Once opened, the witnesses could see there were no telltale footprints in the sand, and the bound-together pieces of Mrs. Goddard's coffin were still in place. But the coffins were, yet again, in disarray. After this latest episode, the Chase family very reasonably removed the coffins, and the vault was abandoned. So, what happened? Who or what was moving the coffins? Our first possible solution is vandalism. The period of the coffin disturbances coincide with unrest on Barbados. In 1807, and after 18 years of effort, the British Parliament passed its Abolition of Slave Trade Act, making it illegal across the British Empire to engage in the slave trade. At sea, the Royal Navy formed its West African anti-slavery squadron to intercept slave ships. But the 1807 Act did not free those already enslaved. Eventually, in 1833, slavery across the empire was outlawed, but in 1816, revolution and the longing for liberty were in the air, and those still manacled were getting restless. On the 14th of April, Easter Sunday, there was an uprising on Barbados. As the ratio of black slave to white slave owner was 4-1, such an insurrection could only be thoroughly alarming to the slave-owning elite class. The rebellion broke out in St. Philip Parish and spread quickly. Although there were 75,000 slaves on Barbados at the time, only 3,000 to 5,000 seemed to have been involved, but that was enough to keep the rebellion going for 4 days. In its aftermath there were many executions. The 6th corpse to enter the Chase vault was Mr. Samuel Brewster, a member of the militia. Brewster was killed during the slave rising and initially buried in St. Philip, only to later be moved to the Chase vault. It should be noted that the infant Samuel Brewster Ames not only had a name similar to that of the adult Samuel Brewster, but was also interned after the uprising. Were Samuel Brewster and Samuel Brewster Ames related? Did they die in the same uprising? Another point worth noting is that Colonel Thomas Chase was said to be a cruel man. It is also said both he and Dorcas Chase took their own lives, but as it was not accepted Christian practice to bury with non-, this may be untrue. We have no confirmation. But if Chase was a particularly brutal slave owner and Samuel Brewster was a member of the militia, then here we have a motive, that of revenge for shenanigans. And yet, surely if a slave wanted to commit an act of desecration, he would have broken into the coffins and smashed the bodies, rather than shift those really heavy coffins around in a tight space, in a manner that left no clue as to how they got into the vault. And why do so over the course of several years? Our second possible solution is that the whole thing was a hoax. According to Forrester M. Allian, who visited Barbados in the early years of the 20th century, the burial register of Christchurch, whilst noting the internments, made no mention of anything out of the ordinary. This register was signed by the rector, Mr. Alderson himself, the initial source of the Chase vault story. Might the Stanton tale have influenced his imagination? If so, then was Nathan Lucas in on it? Lucas seems to have known of the Stanton incident as well, but did he know it from Alderson, or did Alderson learn it from Lucas? It should be noted that the Chase vault mystery arose around the same time as the Romantic movement in literature and culture. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley was published in 1818. It was a bestseller, and the Gothic was doing the rounds in Britain. The moving coffins legend, point out Finneran and Welsh, belongs squarely to this zeitgeist. Could it be that Alderson's initial account of the Chase vault was in fact little more than an attempt at Gothic fiction in the vein of Frankenstein, a modest attempt in which he used a real vault and real names he had read in his own burial register? Could it be that he sent slightly altered versions of his story to correspondents in just the same way a budding fiction writer sends copies of his work to friends and acquaintances? Perhaps it was never meant to be taken too seriously, but took on a life of its own. The socio-cultural milieu from which this tale arose might have been ripe for just such a story. The development of the Chase vault legend reveals much about the mindset of the Anglican Barbadian plantocracy and their perception of the powers, imagined or not, of the resisting enslaved Africans who they believed through magic could move lead coffins and thus undermine the established Anglican psychosocial order of the sugar planters. Our third possible solution involves water. Returning briefly to the Stanton churchyard mystery, the European magazine went on, whence arose this operation, in which it is certain no one had a hand. N.B. It was occasioned by water, as is imagined, though no signs of it appeared at the different periods of time that the vault was opened. Limestone is porous. I once worked in a museum with a tunnel excavated through limestone. When it rained, the tunnel remained dry, but 5 or 6 days after the rainfall, the rainwater would seep through the limestone to such an extent that the rain would resume inside the tunnel. You would need an umbrella. The Chase Vault is said to have been excavated into the limestone bedrock. Would a lead coffin float? In the early 19th century, it was the custom on Barbados to place a corpse in a wooden coffin, which was then placed inside a lead coffin before being interred. In Great Britain at the same time, the lead coffin would have then been placed inside a large outer coffin of wood. All of the bodies in the Chase Vault followed the Barbados custom, except, it would seem, that of Mrs. Goddard. It has been argued that, if it were watertight, a lead coffin would float. Rupert Gould, writing about the Chase Vault mystery in 1928, made the following calculation. A coffin with a wooden inner shell, a leaden middle, and a wooden external shell would weigh 800 weight, which would be about 896 pounds or 406.4 kilograms. The coffin would displace 18 cubic feet of water if fully submerged. The displaced water, assuming it was fresh, would itself weigh 10 hundredweight or 1,120 pounds or 508 kilograms. So according to Gould, the coffin would float. Add to it a body weighing 168 pounds or 76.2 kilograms, and the coffin would still retain a degree of buoyancy. A coffin with only a little buoyancy would have a very small, if any, metacentric height. The head and upper body of the corpse would weigh the upper half of the coffin down, and so we would get the standing on its head phenomenon of the Miss Mary Ann Marie Chase coffin. And let us not forget that this would have been one of the smaller coffins. One objection: if it was water, then why wasn't Mrs. Goddard's coffin affected? It is often said that Mrs. Goddard's coffin was the only one unmoved by whatever force was shifting the coffins. Her coffin would have been lighter, being of wood only, but perhaps it was not watertight and became waterlogged. The additional water might have weighed the wooden coffin just enough to prevent it from rising from the floor to the same extent as the lead coffins. If the wood was a dense wood, like teak, then this might have contributed to its weight, as would any coffin placed on top of it. Later on, when it had fallen to pieces, those pieces were bundled together. The fragments remained where they were in spite of the water. In the case of the bundle, though, the wood was stacked on end, and the water, assuming it rose gradually, would have had to rise rather high to disturb it, to reach the bundle's point of buoyancy. The point of buoyancy on a lead coffin, lying lower, would itself be lower, whilst a bound bundle of broken wood, standing on its end, would be higher, and so it would require more water. Incidentally, any water might not leave much trace in the sand if it rose and fell gradually. Another objection: the Barbados churchyard stands on a headland. Lucas wrote, "There was no vestige of water to be discovered in the vault, no marks where it had been, and the vault is in a level churchyard, by no means in a fall, much less in a run of water." There is a wet season on Barbados, with very heavy rainfall and even hurricanes between July and November. October sees rainfall of 7 inches, 178 millimeters, and September and November 6 inches, 152 millimeters. The first Christchurch parish church, moreover, was destroyed in 1669 by a flood strong enough to carry coffins as far as the beach, so Lucas may have been a bit too hasty in his judgment. A question we might ask the people of Barbados would be, does the Chase vault flood during the wet season? It has stood empty since 1820, and so we might suppose any passerby might have glanced inside after rain or a storm and noticed if the vault had flooded. There should be 200 years of data by which to test this hypothesis. The first instance of coffin displacement occurred between early July 1812, when Miss Dorcas Chase was interred, and early August of the same year, when the vault was reopened for Thomas Chase, and we know July can be wet. The infant Samuel Brewster Ames was interred in late September, and the vault was reopened in mid-November for Samuel Brewster, again during the wet season. The water solution is elegant, but why only the Chase vault? Why not the others in the churchyard? Well, did anyone check the other vaults? Then again, perhaps the Chase vault was situated in just the right spot for the right amount of water to seep up through the limestone. If it was a hoax, on the other hand, then why were the coffins permanently removed in 1820? The Chase vault is empty and has been for 200 years. Was there some other compelling reason to move the coffins out of the vault? Where were the coffins moved to? Has that vault suffered strange disturbances as well? If not, then we can discount poltergeists and curses. But something must have happened to make the Chase family change their minds. It might be the case that there was water, and as it happened again and again, the Chase family, unhappy about their deceased relatives floating about, decided to move the coffins elsewhere. Nathan Lucas, who was present for the 1820 opening, might not have been so convinced that the vault was prone to flooding, and when he wrote his statement, he may have embellished. Meanwhile, the rector, in the mood for Gothic stories, may have written a fictionalized version of what happened. But then the official records for the abandonment of the vault, as opposed to the internments, were lost in the 1831 hurricane that destroyed the third church, and history was left with an imaginative retelling of a local incident, as seen through a Gothic lens.